What if I told you that one woman's refusal to flee saved Western civilization as we know it? Constantinople, January 532 AD. The greatest city in the world is burning. 30,000 rebels storm through the streets screaming, "Nika, Nika, victory, victory," as they torch the most magnificent buildings of the ancient world. Inside the great palace, panic consumes the imperial council. Senators beg Emperor Justinian to escape while he still can. The Roman Empire, which had endured for over a millennium, stands on the brink of total collapse. Then she speaks. A woman who shouldn't even be in the room cuts through the chaos with words that will echo through history. Empire is a fine burial shroud. Theodora, daughter of a bear-keeper, former actress, current empress of Byzantium, has just made the decision that will determine whether civilization advances or retreats into darkness. The actress who became an empire. Nobody expected Theodora to matter. Born in the Hippodrome's slums, raised among circus performers and prostitutes, she clawed her way from society's absolute bottom to its glittering summit. When she married Justinian in 525, the aristocrats assumed she'd be decorative arm candy for their bookish emperor. They underestimated everything about her. While Justinian launched his ambitious campaigns to reclaim the lost Western territories, from Spain to North Africa, Theodora operated the imperial machinery from Constantinople. She wasn't officially co-emperor, but she governed like one. Her fingerprints appeared on every major policy decision, from religious doctrine to economic reform. The moment that changed everything. During the Nika riots, when half of Constantinople lay in ashes and Justinian's nerve finally cracked, Theodora revealed the steel beneath her silk. While his generals counseled retreat, she delivered what may be history's greatest leadership speech. Those who have worn the crown should never survive its loss. May I never see the day when I am not saluted as empress. But her words were just the beginning. As the palace erupted in debate, Theodora was already orchestrating the solution. She secretly contacted Narses, her network of palace eunuchs, and Belisarius, the empire's greatest general. While the men argued, she coordinated a military response that would save not just the throne, but the future of European civilization. The government behind the government. What the chroniclers never recorded, because they couldn't admit it, was that Theodora had been running a parallel administration for years. While Justinian focused on military campaigns and legal codification, she managed the empire's domestic policy, foreign diplomacy, and religious affairs. Her network extended far beyond the palace walls. She placed allies in key monasteries, maintained correspondence with foreign queens, and operated what amounted to the world's first international women's intelligence service. When barbarian kingdoms negotiated with Byzantium, they quickly learned that Theodora's approval mattered as much as Justinian's, the laws that dared not speak her name. Under Theodora's influence, the Byzantine legal code underwent a quiet revolution. Laws protecting women from divorce abuse, regulations preventing the forced prostitution of actresses, protections for religious minorities. These reforms carried Justinian's name but bore Theodora's fingerprints. She understood that lasting power required institutional change, not just personal influence. By embedding her values into the legal framework of the empire, she ensured that her impact would outlive her reign. Future generations of Byzantine women would benefit from protections they never knew came from a former circus performer. The legacy of the unwanted empress. When Theodora died in 548, the official chronicles recorded her as an influential consort. What they didn't record was that she had fundamentally altered how power could be exercised by women in the ancient world. Her model of shadow governance would inspire queens from medieval Spain to Renaissance Italy. She had proven that a woman could save an empire, reshape a civilization, and change the course of history, all while maintaining the fiction that someone else held the real authority. The Justinian Code would become the foundation of European law for the next 1,000 years. The reconquest of the Mediterranean would restore Roman glory for generations. But historians rarely mention that these achievements were made possible by a woman who refused to run when the world was burning around her. Think you know who really ruled the ancient world? Hit that like button if this story shocked you, subscribe for more hidden histories that textbooks never taught you, and drop a comment below. Had you ever heard of Theodora's real power before watching this? Let's discuss in the comments section. What would you sacrifice to prevent a civilization from destroying itself? Thebes, 1479 BC. The mummified body of Pharaoh Thutmose II lies in state, while priests chant funeral hymns and nobles whisper about succession. The heir, 9-year-old Thutmose III, barely understands the crown's weight, let alone its responsibilities. Egypt, the superpower of the ancient world, faces external threats from Nubian rebels, Assyrian expansion, and Hittite aggression. Standing in the temple shadows is Hatshepsut, the royal widow. Protocol demands she serve as regent until the boy king reaches maturity. Tradition requires her to prepare him for military conquest. Expectations assume she'll fade into obscurity once he's ready to lead armies. Hatshepsut had different plans for Egypt's future. The regent who refused to regent from day one of her regency, Hatshepsut demonstrated a radical understanding of leadership. While court advisors expected her to mobilize for war, following the pattern of every pharaoh before her, she pivoted towards something revolutionary: economic transformation and cultural renaissance. This wasn't naive pacifism. Hatshepsut had studied Egypt's military history and reached a startling conclusion. Constant warfare was bleeding the kingdom dry. While pharaohs chased glory in foreign territories, domestic infrastructure crumbled, trade networks collapsed, and the population suffered under crushing taxation to fund endless campaigns. The divine gender revolution. Around her 7th year as regent, something unprecedented occurred in Egyptian art and architecture. Temple reliefs began depicting Hatshepsut with a pharaoh's false beard, royal regalia, and masculine ceremonial dress. She hadn't usurped the throne through violence or conspiracy. She had transformed herself into a legitimate pharaoh through sheer force of divine reinvention. This metamorphosis was strategic genius. In a culture where divine kingship required masculine identity, Hatshepsut discovered how to transcend gender limitations without shattering religious orthodoxy. If the gods demanded a male pharaoh, she would become one, mythologically, visually, and politically. The Golden Age nobody remembers. For 22 years, while Thutmose III received military training that would eventually make him Egypt's greatest conqueror, Hatshepsut governed the most prosperous and peaceful Egypt in centuries. Her achievements were staggering. She organized the most ambitious trade expedition in Egyptian history to the legendary kingdom of Punt, constructed architectural marvels that still inspire awe today, and established commercial networks reaching from Nubia to the eastern Mediterranean. But her true genius lay in diplomatic invisibility. While neighboring kingdoms prepared for Egyptian military aggression, Hatshepsut surprised them with trade delegations. While enemies fortified against invasion, she sent gifts and marriage proposals. The women's government archaeological evidence reveals that Hatshepsut created something unprecedented, a female administrative network operating parallel to traditional male hierarchies. She promoted noble women to key governmental positions, sponsored influential priestesses, and established communication systems that bypassed conventional political channels. This network wasn't just administrative innovation, it was social revolution. For the first time in recorded history, women exercised coordinated political power across multiple levels of government, creating precedents that would influence civilizations for millennia. The price of peace. When Hatshepsut died in 1458 BC, Thutmose III finally assumed full pharaonic authority. His first act systematically erased her inscriptions, destroyed her statues, and eliminated her name from official records. The historical narrative would claim she had been an illegitimate usurper who delayed Egypt's rightful military destiny. But modern archaeology tells a different story. During Hatshepsut's reign, Egypt achieved levels of prosperity, artistic innovation, and international influence that wouldn't be matched for centuries. Her invisible kingdom had actually been one of ancient civilization's golden ages. The pharaoh who became a ghost. Hatshepsut's erasure from history was so thorough that until the 19th century, scholars didn't even know she had existed. Yet her influence echoed through subsequent cultures in unexpected ways. Medieval European queens studied recovered fragments of her governmental techniques. Islamic sultanates adopted similar strategies of legitimacy through identity transformation. She had proven that supreme power could be exercised by a woman, provided she possessed the wisdom to convince the world she was a man. Her legacy wasn't just governing an empire, it was demonstrating that sometimes the greatest leaders are those history forgets to remember. The irony is profound. The pharaoh who gave Egypt its most peaceful and prosperous era was deliberately erased by the very successors who benefited from her achievements. Thutmose III's military conquests were funded by the wealth Hatshepsut had accumulated through trade. His empire was built on the stability she had created through diplomacy. What if the richest empire on earth was secretly controlled by a woman whose name was forbidden from official histories? Agra, 1611. In the gardens where the Taj Mahal will one day rise, Mughal Emperor Jahangir becomes obsessed with a 34-year-old Persian widow named Mehr-un-Nisa. Their wedding will be magnificent. Poets will sing her beauty. Courtiers will celebrate the new empress. What none of them realize is that they're witnessing the rise of the most cunning ruler in Indian history. Mehr-un-Nisa will receive a new name, Nur Jahan, light of the world. But the light she casts will be so brilliant that it blinds everyone to who actually controls the wealthiest empire on the planet. The architect of invisible authority, Nur Jahan, didn't stumble into power. She engineered it. Daughter of Persian nobles in exile, she had been educated in poetry, mathematics, military strategy, and most importantly, the subtle art of political survival. Her first marriage to an army officer had taught her how imperial machinery operated from the inside. When Jahangir fell in love with her, Nur Jahan had already diagnosed the system's vulnerabilities. The emperor was brilliant but erratic, addicted to opium and wine, and frequently absent on military campaigns. The empire needed steady leadership that operated behind the scenes, building the shadow bureaucracy. While Jahangir led campaigns against rebellious Deccan kingdoms and Persian incursions, Nur Jahan methodically constructed a parallel government. Her strategy was multi-layered. She controlled imperial finances, directed foreign diplomacy, administered justice, and most audaciously began issuing imperial decrees with her own signature. By 1616, Mughal coins carried a revolutionary inscription. By order of King Jahangir, gold has value by the name of Nur Jahan. It was the first time in Islamic history that a woman's name appeared on official imperial currency, a symbol of power that couldn't be hidden or denied. The harem intelligence network, Nur Jahan, understood that real power depended on information superiority. She transformed something everyone ignored into her greatest weapon, the imperial harem. These women, dismissed as decorative by male courtiers, became the eyes and ears of an empire. Concubines, servants, wives of nobles and merchants, all reported directly to Nur Jahan. This network provided real-time intelligence about conspiracies, enemy troop movements, spice trade fluctuations, and court gossip. She possessed better information than the emperor's official spies because her sources were invisible to traditional power structures. The Silk Road diplomat, when European ambassadors arrived at the Mughal court, they officially negotiated with Jahangir. In reality, they dealt with Nur Jahan. British East India Company records reveal she dictated trade terms, decided which ports opened to foreign commerce, and established tariffs that defined Indian Ocean economics. Her genius lay in making these men believe they were persuading the emperor when they were actually being manipulated by a woman who understood geopolitics as well as male psychology. She turned diplomatic protocol into performance art, with herself as the invisible director. The succession crisis. Nur Jahan's real test came when Jahangir died in 1627. Her stepson, Prince Khurram, who would become Shah Jahan, builder of the Taj Mahal, rebelled against female regency. The civil war that followed revealed how completely Nur Jahan had consolidated power. She commanded armies, negotiated with rebel generals, managed war finances, and coordinated resistance across multiple fronts. For months, the Mughal Empire was literally governed by a woman fighting to maintain the throne for her chosen successor. The conflict demonstrated that she wasn't just an influential consort, she was a head of state. Defeat and historical erasure. When she finally lost the civil war, Nur Jahan was exiled to Lahore with a generous pension. Shah Jahan systematically erased her name from official records. The historical narrative would claim she had been an influential empress consort, never acknowledging that she had governed the empire de facto for 15 years. Her European contemporaries, however, knew the truth. English traveller Thomas Rowe wrote, "Nur Jahan governs him and winds him up at her pleasure." Dutch merchants reported that no major policy decisions occurred without her approval. Persian diplomats recorded that she was the real authority behind Mughal foreign policy. The light that couldn't be extinguished. Nur Jahan died in 1645, but her model of female power exercised through informal networks had permanently transformed Mughal politics. Future empresses studied her methods, and her influence extended to Ottoman and Safavid courts. In Europe, where queens faced similar limitations, her example inspired new approaches to exercising authority. She had proven that a woman could govern the world's richest empire, provided she was clever enough to make everyone believe the power lay elsewhere. Her legacy wasn't just controlling vast territories and wealth, it was demonstrating that supreme authority transcends official titles and operates through intelligence, networks, and strategic patience. The Taj Mahal, built by the man who destroyed her political legacy, ironically became a monument to the kind of love Nur Jahan had mastered. Powerful, beautiful, and enduring far beyond the lives of those who created it. Shocked to learn that one of history's richest empires was secretly run by a woman who was erased from the textbooks. Hit like if this story amazed you, subscribe for more hidden rulers of history, and drop a comment. Had you ever heard of Nur Jahan before this video? Let's uncover more forgotten empresses together. Imagine a woman who was Queen of France, then Queen of England, and finally led a rebellion against her own husband to reshape the medieval world. Poitiers, 1137. A 15-year-old girl inherits the richest duchy in Western Europe. Eleanor of Aquitaine controls more territory than the King of France, possesses more wealth than the Holy Roman Emperor, and commands more culture than all of English nobility combined. What nobody suspects is that this teenager will become the most powerful woman of the Middle Ages, and the most dangerous. For the next 60 years, Eleanor will govern from the shadows of two major kingdoms, raise kings and queens, finance crusades, patronize the birth of courtly literature, and ultimately lead a civil war that will forever change the balance of power in the Western world. The Duchess, worth more than kingdoms, Eleanor wasn't just an heiress. She was an economic institution. Aquitaine controlled Mediterranean Atlantic trade routes, produced Europe's finest wines, and maintained larger armies than many independent kingdoms. When she married Louis VII of France in 1137, she technically became queen consort. In reality, she was the dominant economic partner in the alliance. Her first act of invisible power was revolutionary. She financed the Second Crusade with her own resources, not the French royal treasury. When Louis VII marched toward the Holy Land in 1147, Eleanor didn't just fund the expedition. She strategically directed it from Paris, coordinating logistics, communications, and finances for one of medieval history's most ambitious military enterprises. The divorce that remapped Europe. When Eleanor divorced Louis VII in 1152, officially for consanguinity, actually for political incompatibility, she wasn't just ending a marriage, she was reorganizing Europe's geopolitical map. 8 weeks later, she married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou, who would soon become Henry II of England. This seemingly personal decision had monumental strategic consequences. Eleanor had transferred Aquitaine's control from France to England, creating the Angevin Empire, a domain stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees. For the next decade, while Henry II fought in Normandy, Ireland and Wales, Eleanor governed England as de facto regent. The court that invented romance. But Eleanor understood that real medieval power didn't depend solely on armies and castles, it depended on culture. At Poitiers, she created Europe's most sophisticated court, where troubadours invented courtly love. Chivalric codes were codified, and the first European novels were written. This cultural revolution wasn't ornamental, it was strategic. Eleanor was creating a new civilization model that competed directly with church authority and traditional feudal power structures. Her courts of love didn't just entertain nobility, they educated an entire generation of European leaders in new ways of thinking about power, honor, and authority. The family revolution. Eleanor's most extraordinary exercise of power came in 1173, when she did something unthinkable. She organized a rebellion against her own husband. She convinced her sons, Henry the Young King, Richard the Lionheart, and Geoffrey of Brittany, to revolt against Henry II. For 2 years, Western Europe bled in a civil war with Eleanor as the invisible strategist behind the uprising. Her calculation was complex. Henry II had become too authoritarian, threatening both noble rights and Aquitaine's interests. Eleanor wasn't just defending her own domains. She was leading a constitutional revolution that would limit royal power and establish precedents for future parliamentary monarchies. The prisoner who kept ruling. When the rebellion failed, Henry II imprisoned Eleanor for 16 years, but even from captivity, she continued influencing European politics. Her letters, written in sophisticated code combining Latin, French and Provençal, coordinated her son's actions, directed Aquitaine's administration, and maintained alliances she had built over decades. Archaeological correspondence reveals that Eleanor developed from prison a communication network extending from Scotland to Sicily, from Castile to Byzantium. She was literally Europe's most powerful prisoner, governing an empire from a cell. The Queen Mother, who crowned kings. When Henry II died in 1189, Eleanor, now 67, was released and immediately assumed regency during Richard the Lionheart's absence on crusade. For the next 15 years, she was the one actually governing the Angevin Empire, coordinating foreign policy, managing finances, and most importantly, securing dynastic succession. Her final great political performance occurred at age 79, when she personally traveled to Castile to negotiate her granddaughter Blanche's marriage to future Louis VIII of France. This marriage didn't just seal peace between France and England, it established foundations for future Iberian unification. The Eternal Queen's Revolution. Eleanor died in 1204, but her model of female power exercised across multiple generations had forever transformed European monarchy. She had demonstrated that a woman could govern not just one kingdom, but a system of kingdoms, not just during one husband's lifetime, but through the lives of multiple husbands, sons, and grandsons. Her methods would be studied by future queens, from Isabella of Castile to Catherine de' Medici. Her understanding that real power transcends official titles and depends on networks, culture, and long-term strategic vision became fundamental principles of modern political art. Eleanor hadn't just governed in secret, she had reinvented what it meant to be a queen in medieval Europe. Her legacy wasn't just controlling empires, it was proving that supreme power could be exercised by a woman who understood that true authority transcends crowns and resides in the ability to shape civilization's future. The queen who outlived history. Perhaps Eleanor's greatest achievement was longevity itself. She lived through the reigns of 6 kings, influenced the policies of 8 kingdoms, and shaped the destinies of 3 generations of European royalty. When she finally died at 82, she had witnessed and directed more historical change than any monarch of her era. Her tomb in Fontevraud Abbey shows her reading a book, a revolutionary image for medieval queens, who were typically depicted praying or mourning. Even in death, Eleanor insisted on being remembered as an intellectual, a strategist, and a woman who wielded power through knowledge rather than just birthright. Amazed that one woman shaped European politics for over 60 years, while most history books barely mention her. Smash that like button if Eleanor's story blew your mind. Subscribe for more hidden histories of powerful women, and tell us in the comments, which of these 4 shadow queens impressed you most? Eleanor, Nurjahan, Hatshepsut, or Theodora? We want to hear your thoughts about these incredible women who ruled the world in secret. For 4 chapters, we've uncovered an uncomfortable truth. Some of humanity's most crucial decisions were made by women whose names were systematically erased from official records. From Theodora saving the Byzantine Empire to Eleanor revolutionizing European monarchy, these women didn't just govern. They redefined what it meant to exercise supreme power. Their legacy isn't simply having directed empires from the shadows, but proving that genuine leadership transcends official titles and resides in the capacity to shape civilization's destiny. In a world where female authority was officially impossible, they made it inevitable. They understood something that escaped their male contemporaries. Real power isn't about wearing crowns or commanding armies. It's about controlling information, building networks, shaping culture, and thinking in generations rather than reigns. History buried them. We've brought them back to light. These shadow queens remind us that the most important rulers are often the ones whose stories we've never been told. They governed empires, shaped religions, financed crusades, and launched revolutions, all while maintaining the fiction that someone else held the real authority. Their greatest victory wasn't just wielding power despite being women in patriarchal societies. It was proving that the most effective leadership often operates invisibly, that the most lasting influence comes from those who change the world without demanding credit for it. They were the queens history tried to forget, but their empires remember everything.